I'm looking forward to hearing from him, and I'm sure his comments will provoke some interesting questions. Both Donna and Steve have Rhode Island connections. Donna grew up in Portsmouth, and Steve received his master's degree from the ecoRI Graduate School of Oceanography right down the hill. As can be the norm in the energy business, Donna and Steve have moved a few times. They've lived in Stavanger, Norway, London, Riyadh, New Orleans, Dallas, and now call Houston their home. They have three adult children and enjoy getting to the South Jersey shore in the summer. I'm hopeful that we might be able to entice them to make a home here in Rhode Island. Please welcome Steve Greenlee.
Everybody hear me okay? I'm a little sweaty, from Texas. I'm not used to the warm weather. So thanks for the invitation to come speak to you today. We just drove up from New Jersey a little earlier. What I wanted to do today, I think the title of my talk was about my favorite subject, which is exploration, oil and gas exploration. I've been doing it for a long, long time. The last 8 years, I've been responsible for ExxonMobil's global oil and gas exploration business. And what I wanted to do is first take you through a few opening slides to set the context of why we actually are concerned about investment and exploration, adding new resources and all that, just so we all have the sort of same context of why we are investing. And I'll try to get through that pretty quick. Hopefully it won't be too dry. And then I'll go into, I'm going to use some slides that are from our latest quarterly shareholder presentation. And I'm not going to use them to sell stock, although if you are any ExxonMobil shareholders, you're probably wishing that we did more of that. But I'm going to use it really to sort of tell you some stories about the exploration end of that, how we came to come by these resources, how we ended up getting to the exploration discoveries, and how we actually are moving towards investing in those to actually for future production. They all have an interesting story. I hope you'll be entertained as I talk about it. So I want to get to them quickly. So I don't know if I have, am I loaded? Okay. So I'm going to talk about demand, and I'm going to talk about supply. A few slides just to get us all on the same page. And so first slide that I have here is a slide that shows kind of from our energy outlook. And I'd encourage you, if you're interested, there's ExxonMobil has an energy outlook, BP has an energy outlook, IEA has a really good energy outlook that's done internationally. The EIA from the U.S. government has an energy outlook. The conclusions are all quite similar, actually. So you look at ExxonMobil's, you can look at the EIAs or look at BP's or whatever, they all come to somewhat of the same conclusion. The big point that I want to show on this is that there's a number of different kind of key societal demands for energy. The biggest growth is in electricity generation. You can see that here. And electricity generation has been traditionally gas, coal, and nuclear. And so gas growth, as you can see, going from the first bar, which is 16, going to 2025, and then the outlook to 2040, would show an increase in gas really at the expense of some coal, some growth in nuclear, and then somewhat rapid growth in renewables. And you can see today, or 2016, where we are growing to substantially higher. And you all know that that's being driven by emerging economies, mostly in Asia. The second largest is industrial use. And again, the green is oil, red is gas, the sort of yellow is coal, so forth and so on. You can see industrial is a huge consumer of oil and gas, plastics, petrochemicals, fertilizers, and all that. So you can see modest growth in that through time. And then the third fastest growing and the third largest consumer of energy is transportation. So we'll talk more about that in just a little bit, but liquid fuels are hard to replace in the transportation space. Liquid fuels for ships, for aviation, for cars, for trucks and all that. And you can see that there is some penetration of renewables and gas and all that, but our energy outlook would, and I'll talk more about this, would have it growing modestly to 2040. So this puts the same numbers in a little bit of a different context. And it's subdivides it by products, oil, gas, coal, et cetera, et cetera. You can see there's modest growth of oil, which is the largest source of energy today. We see that it'll grow slightly. It's about 1% to 1.5% growth over time, so growing kind of slow. Gas grows faster. The gas demand picture is more uncertain because it relies on things like LNG. We'll talk more about that. Coal declines slightly. Biomass, which is used by a lot of the developing world. Growth in nuclear, and then rapid growth in wind and solar biofuels, but that's from a small base. So, of course, the first question that everybody would ask is, well, what about electric cars and car electrification and all that? And if you pull up on the website the Energy Outlook, it has a number of scenarios that project different types of penetration of electric vehicles and all that. And one that you can see here would project, the upper green is light-duty transportation. It would say that by 2040 we have total penetration of electric cars, and internal combustion engines are largely out of the light car fleet. So you can see that will go down to 0. And that will result, all other things being equal, in about the same demand as we had in 2013. And that's about a 5% decrease in greenhouse gas emissions. So really the big drivers that you can see there for growth in the liquid sector, that's just liquids over there on the right. The big growth is in petrochemicals and commercial transportation. And that's what's growing dramatically now. So from 2000, around the turn of the century, we were a little less than 80 million barrels a day. Today, we're at 99 and counting. Next year, we should cross 100 million barrels a day. So I think the bottom line from all this is, as we see it now, obviously oil and gas demand is very strong, and as we project out to the future, although there will be significant growth in renewables, nuclear, that oil and gas will still be a significant contributor to the energy that we use every day. Okay, let's get to supply, which is kind of an interesting story. And the first thing I always want to talk about when I talk about supply is, well, who's supplying oil and gas for the world? Where do we source our liquids? And I'm going to talk more about liquids because gas is a whole different story. I could spend an hour talking about gas. But interestingly, if you were around 1972, and looking out at the crowd, most of you were around in 1972, the big international oil companies, the IOCs, Shell, ExxonMobil, Chevron, and all that, supplied nearly 3/4 of the liquids that we consume worldwide. And through nationalization of Saudi Aramco and all these big Middle Eastern, Latin American oil-producing regions and all that, it is dramatically less now. So in terms of the big international oil companies, we actually produce, from a conventional basis, less than 10% of the world's oil and gas. And when you buy gasoline at an ExxonMobil station, it may have some equity ExxonMobil crude, but more than likely it's oil and gas or gasoline that's been refined by ExxonMobil but has been purchased. The crude oil was purchased from one of these NOCs. And the other E&P is smaller exploration companies and smaller international oil companies. The one thing you can see in the middle, which I'll talk a lot more about, is that the U.S. tight oil wedge, and virtually all the growth in the production that we've seen over the last several years is from American tight oil, which has grown dramatically. On the right, you can see a chart that shows, it's a super interesting chart, just so it shows in the last 10 years, where has the new liquid supply been discovered? And you can see there's some oil sands. The oil sands business is not too great now. But tight liquids are these unconventional oils that are sourced out of primarily North America. There's some new tight oil that's being sourced. That's what's producing the new oil that's coming online. The next line shown in red is Brazil. Brazil has been the source of most conventional oil discoveries over the last decade. And then the next 5, or the next line, the next 10, and then everyone else. So if you look at what's new sources of crude oil, it's tight liquids and Brazil. Okay, those are the big two that have been on the scene over the last 10 years. This is an interesting slide. If you look at the green and reds, green is oil, red is gas, and these are conventional discoveries from 1960 to 2017. So you can see that there's been a significant decline overall in the number of discoveries and the amount of volumes of oil and gas have been discovered. But, and you can see that since 2010, it's decreased dramatically. There's reasons for that. They've been unsuccessful. Also, relatively low prices that haven't encouraged conventional oil and gas exploration. But on top, the yellow, as I mentioned with tight oil, you can see that unconventional oil and gas have really made up the difference. So there has been a huge amount of oil and gas discovered and put online in tight oil and tight gas. And again, that's primarily an American phenomenon. And so as we've talked, as you've seen on the news, the U.S. has largely supplanted the Middle East as the swing oil producer in the world, where the price of oil was determined by how much oil Saudi Arabia produced. It's largely a function of what the U.S. tight oil producers can produce. So really changed the world. And we talk, go to the next one. So if you look at the global hydrocarbon endowment, how much oil and gas do we think, and this is our energy outlook largely derived from the USGS, how much oil and gas do we think is left in the world? This doesn't have a pointer, but the green, this oil is on your left, gas is on the right. You can see how much has been produced between 2000 and 2015, and those are in trillions of barrels on the left. You can see that we produced a significant amount of oil, but that the significant growth in the remaining resource is largely as a result of our view of unconventionals. So whereas before resources were getting a bit more difficult, we called it an era of resource scarcity, supported very high oil prices above $100. Today, because there are all these other alternatives, we call this an era of resource abundance. You have a lot of different choices. I'll talk more about that. But with these other choices, it really has not, over the last few years, supported very high oil prices. The same thing's happened with gas. Not only has gas been revolutionized because of these new unconventional resources, which in North America seem limitless with the Marcellus, with all the different gas-producing basins, but also LNG, which is an enabler for huge gas deposits that are found overseas to be commercialized and brought to market. So the amount of oil and gas that we have to work with now is much larger than what we would have anticipated 10, 15 years ago, largely as a result of these new unconventional technologies. It just shows the new technologies, the growth in oil and gas from 2000 to where we are now, that sort of relentless 1.5% per year rise. And it shows the conventional crude and condensate declining off, being replaced by these new technologies, deep water, oil sands, tight oils, and so forth and so on. So that's how we look at it today. So this is the most important slide for relative to exploration in terms of the energy outlook slides that I wanted to cover. If you think about oil demand going up about 1%, 1.5%, you know, you may look at the resource base that I'll talk about in a minute, which we have a large resource base. You kind of want to say, well, why am I so uptight about exploration and bringing new resources in? Why do I need to continually invest in new oil and gas production, even as we're trying to reduce our carbon intensity in the overall energy mix as we go forward? The reason that we're on this huge treadmill in all oil companies, why growth is such a huge issue for those that invest in us, is because we're in a depletion business. As soon as you turn on a field, as soon as you turn on one of these wells, either conventional or unconventional, they start to decline, and they decline rapidly. So our whole portfolio, and as an industry, declines at 5 to 7% a year. So if you don't continue to invest, your overall production falls off sharply. So what this shows is, in the green, between 2016 and 2040, you decline off what we currently have as our producing base into a very, very low number. So that, in order to replenish that production, it requires continuous investment and continuous replenishment of the resource base. And that's what's shown as supply required. And so if you think about between 2016 and 2040, in order for us to meet what we see as that modest demand growth, we need to completely reproduce or renew our current production base. So that means we have 100% of the resources that are currently online, 100% needs to be renewed as we go to 2040, which is an amazing feat. It requires trillions of dollars. And so if you look at the IEA website, they have a great discussion about replenishment of the resource base and all that. So 100% replacement doesn't get near to what you actually have to invest, because everything you put on actually starts declining from the day you put it on. So in reality, you need to put about 200% of the current producing base on production before 2040 to actually meet the demand that we anticipate in the future. So for me, at ExxonMobil, we produce about 4 million oil equivalent barrels a day, give or take, depending on where we are in the cycle. That means that we need to add nearly 250,000 barrels of oil equivalent production per year just to stay flat. And of course, the analysts don't like us to stay flat, they want us to grow. So you can see what the sort of investment treadmill is on that, and the need to replenish our producing resource base. So that's why we explore, that's why we continue to invest. And as soon as you have a period like we had in 2014 when people aren't investing, you run the risk of a supply shock, because that decline is relentless, and as soon as the decline catches up with demand, and you have a shortage, that's when you start to have price issues that are up there. Okay, so that's the dry part of the discussion. Hopefully we're all on the same page and are thinking of why we need to continue to invest, the case for investment, the case for exploration.